Welcome back to Science at Mrs. Mac's house. It was really nice to hear from you this week in Google Classroom. I've missed seeing you, and it's not quite the same without the two-way interactions, is it? But thank you for sending messages, and I suppose we'll just get straight into it.
Okay, just a little bit of a refresher on grade 3-4 biology. Last year we learnt about 5 living kingdoms. Some of them are easier to remember than others. The first group are the animals. The second group are the plants. In fact, in the past, they used to think there were only these two groups. Then they discovered that fungi were a separate group. And once microscopes came into being, they then discovered bacteria, which are super tiny, and the protists. And we looked at those under the microscope last year, so you might be familiar with them. Now, there are actually other groups too that you'll learn about as you get older in high school, but for the sake of ease, let's just stick with these 5. So creatures in the animal kingdom, which includes ourselves, we can't actually make our own energy. We need to eat stuff to make energy. So we take into our bodies food, and we also take into our bodies oxygen. And these two things, in a chemical reaction called respiration, they get converted or changed into water and carbon dioxide. And when this happens, it produces energy, which we use for all the systems in our body. Plants, on the other hand, are the complete opposite of us. So plants, they can actually get energy, trap it from the sun, which we can't do. Now, they use a process called photosynthesis. They suck up water through their roots, they breathe in carbon dioxide, and then they can catch energy from the sun and turn that into food to help them grow, and also into oxygen, which they use a little bit of, but then they release it. So what the plants breathe out, we breathe in, and what we breathe out, they breathe in. Now, fungi. This is the group that we're kind of looking at today. Fungi, interestingly enough, are the same as us. They also use respiration to get energy. So fungi, just like us, need to absorb food, and then they use oxygen, and their bodies, or their parts, use this to create energy and release water and carbon dioxide as well. So when you think about it, we are actually more closely related to a fungus than we are to plants, which is kind of a bit creepy. So you might have noticed that these two reactions are actually the opposite of each other, respiration and photosynthesis, and both of these are essential for our planet. We'll be learning a bit more about that.
Some of you have done this one before, so if that's you, then I'd like you to skip forward in the video to the other options. They're right at the end of this little section. So have a look at options for you if you've already done this. So on your little bags, I want you to write down a different ingredient that you're going to feed the yeast. We're trying to find out, what does yeast like to eat? Does it have a preference? Will it grow better if you feed it oil? Or will it grow better if you feed it sugar or flour or salt or just plain water? Which works best? Now, as you probably know from other things I've taught you, yeast is actually kind of in a dormant state. It's not really awake and growing when you buy it like this, and you keep it in the fridge to keep it that way. But if you want to wake it up, you've got to get it wet. So all of these bags are going to have a little bit of water in it. And as you also should know, if you want something to be a fair test, you need to add the same amount of water to each bag. So I'm going to make it half a cup of water for each bag. And we will use half a teaspoon of yeast. So your first step is half a teaspoon of yeast. Put it in the water. And this bag here is going to be our control. Now that means we're not going to give it any other food. We're just going to see what happens when you put yeast in water. You just wake it up, okay? Now, you can see right now, I'm just trying to squeeze the extra air out of the bag because the way we're going to measure if this yeast is growing is by whether the bag starts puffing up or not. Now, as you just saw in the last little video, when yeast is happy and breathing, it breathes out carbon dioxide just like we do, and that carbon dioxide is a gas, so it will fill up like a balloon if the yeast is growing inside the bag. Now, that's my first one. It's my control. I should have written this first, but right on the front of it, what's going on in that bag. So I'm just writing control, and then I'll just write water only underneath. All right, control, I wrote H2O, which is water, okay? That's this one. Second bag, again, you need to put half a cup of water in it because we want the test to be fair, so we need the same conditions for the yeast in every bag, except for the one thing that you're testing and changing. All right, half a teaspoon of yeast again to wake it up. And this time we're going to put another ingredient in there with it. These are my 4 ingredients. I'm going to start with salt this time. So I'll put half a teaspoon of salt in there. And then on the front of that I'm going to write salt. Give it a little bit of a mix and lie it down next to the other one. Now at the start they're going to look very similar because the yeast won't have started growing yet. It's probably just waking up right now. Alright, the rest of these I'm just going to continue with that same pattern and I'll speed it up so this goes a bit quicker. Okay, make sure you clean up after yourself so Mum doesn't get upset. Now, these 5 bags are going to lay on the bench for the next little while, and I'm going to check on them regularly. You can do it as often as you like. But what I do want you to do now is to grab a camera or your iPad and to take a photograph of what that looks like now. Then, as the time passes, maybe every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes, set a timer, come back, take another photograph, and just have a look. Now, if that yeast is happy and it likes the food that you've fed it, it's going to be growing and breeding. It actually buds off. It's like a little ball and a little bit sort of breaks off the side and makes a new one. And so if that's happening, then carbon dioxide will be being produced and this bag will start to puff up. So at the end of, I reckon, an hour, maybe 2 hours, I would like you to come back to Google Classroom and write a little comment saying what ingredient do you think yeast likes the best? What's their favorite food according to your experiment? If you want to upload a photo as well, you can try and do that. And I look forward to hearing what your results are. I'll see you next time. Okay, I'm back. It's about 5 minutes later. They still pretty much all look the same, so I'm going to have to come back later. But for those of you who already did this experiment, I've got another idea for you because you still need to do something. I would like you to do a similar experiment, but I want you to test if yeast works better at a particular temperature. So I was thinking you could have maybe just 3 bags, or 4 if you want to do more. You could have ice cold water in one, and you could have normal room temperature water in another. And then you could have one that's a bit warm, like half boiling water and half normal. And then you could have one, I don't know if boiling water might melt the bag, but one that's a bit hotter. And then you could put the same amount of yeast into each bag and see if that makes a difference. And then instead of doing this one about ingredients, can you please write a comment that says, does temperature make a difference to whether yeast produces carbon dioxide? And you can get back to me about that. Okay, see you later. Now, a few of you asked me to see science in Legoland. I actually created it with my daughter, more for kind of the younger students, but why not? Here you go. Here's science in Legoland for your entertainment. Bye.
Once upon a time, in a faraway land made of Lego, lived two minifigures. One was called Danielle.
I'm called Danielle.
And the other was Sunny. I'm Sunny. It was almost lunchtime, and Sunny was working up an appetite, cooking a chicken drumstick on an open fire. He hummed merrily to himself. Danielle was trying to be a hardcore fisherman, catching fish with her bare hands.
Why do they keep slipping out of my hands? It's almost like they don't want to be caught.
Hey, would you like a drink of lemonade, Danielle?
No thanks.
How about water? I've got cold water in the fridge.
No thanks, I'm good.
Juice? I've got apple, orange, or apple with orange.
Sunny, I don't want to drink, okay?
Okay. Not even a milkshake? Danielle had given up fishing and was now eating a leaf off a nearby bush. What are you eating?
Herbs. I'm trying to find the perfect herb for our chicken drumstick.
No! I can't believe I forgot the secret herbs and spices!
Do you want to go explore deep in the dark, scary forest for the perfect secret herbs and spices?
It was quickly decided that this was indeed a good plan, and the two set off on their quest to find the perfect secret herbs and spices for their chicken drumstick. Sunny found a herb straight away. I found one! Over here! Come and have a look, Danielle! Come and look! It's green and slimy, but it looks delicious.
Sunny, that's gillyweed. I don't think that would go with chicken.
Whoa, they have gillyweed in Australia? They continued on their journey. Hey Danielle, this plant's got anger issues.
What are you talking about?
It screams every time I try to pull it out of the ground.
It's a mandrake, Sunny. Leave it alone.
They continued on their journey.
Sunny, what are you doing up there?
Oh, nothing. I'm just looking at the seaweed in the tree and wondering how it got here and why it's grabbing my foot.
I think that might be Devil's Snare, Sunny. Why don't you come and walk next to me where I can keep a very close eye on you?
Okay. As they walked past the Whomping Willow, the forest became dark and a little more spooky than before. This is when their actual science moment began, for in front of them, in a small clearing, in a dense forest, lay the actual bone of an actual unknown creature. Danielle and Sunny stood pondering what this creature may have been. Danielle wondered if the bone was from a chicken.
Hey, maybe that's where your chicken drumstick came from.
That's a crazy idea. It's got to be the leg off one of the fish in the creek back there. There were so many things wrong with this idea that Danielle didn't know what to say. For one thing, this bone was nowhere near the creek. Secondly, it didn't look a whole lot like a leg bone. And finally, fish don't usually have legs. After much debating, the pair decided that the bone might be the skull of an animal, due to the presence of eye sockets and teeth. With part of the mystery solved, they had only to discover what type of animal it might be from. Sunny was full of ideas. A unicorn?
They're not actually real animals, Sunny.
Oh, a dinosaur?
They're extinct. Why don't we try and think about all the groups of animals that actually live on Earth and have bones, and then we can work out which animal it might be.
Good plan. Animals with bones. Animals with bones. Actually, I can't think of any. Finally, the pair came up with a list of 5 groups of animals that have bones. Birds, reptiles, mammals, fish, and amphibians. What's an amphibian?
It's the group that frogs are in. They live half their life in the water and half on land. They lay eggs and are usually pretty slimy.
But they don't have teeth. So this can't be an amphibian skull.
I guess not.
Do birds have teeth?
I don't know.
Just then, Sunny came up with a plan. Maybe if they could get a ruler, they could find out how big it actually was. This thing looks enormous. Its head is even bigger than mine. Do you think I should go get a ruler so we can measure it?
Yeah, good plan.
Got it!
Let's measure the skull.
At this point, the two were stumped. They decided to call on the help of their 430 friends at Whitehorse Primary School. Will Danielle and Sunny be able to discover the identity of this creature before darkness falls? Will their friends at Whitehorse Primary School help them? And what could have happened to their chicken drumstick? Find out in next week's episode of Science in Legoland.
So it's time that we talk about the coconut octopus again. I've had lots of comments about this. Some people have asked questions about where the coconuts actually come from. Good question. And I need to kind of mention a couple of things that I saw when I watched the Octonauts episode about the coconut octopus. So my daughter found it for me on the computer because she knew about this already, as I told you. And in that episode, two things happened that are very interesting, but not very real, I don't think. So one of those things is that the octopus came out of the water, crept up onto the beach, stole everybody's coconuts, and then ran back into the water. I don't think that's actually how they do it. I don't think octopus usually come out of the water. I know there's a couple of species that can, but I don't think these ones do. I think they find them on the bottom of the ocean. I'm assuming the coconuts shells have washed in there from, nearby islands and palm trees. So that's the first one. Second one, this one's fantastic. If this was true, it'd be so good. The octopus in Octonauts gets coconut, puts its little tentacle out of the ocean, and then piffs it over its head, and it flies off into the distance into an island, and then it hits this creature on the head. It's a great moment, but I don't think it's actually something octopus can do. I've read all the articles I could find on it about their behavior and all that stuff, but as far as I know, octopus do not throw coconuts at people's heads. So let's just debunk that right now. Alright, 5-6, that's all I have for you today. There's two things I'd like you to do now, please. The first one is make sure you do the experiment and put your answer up on Google Classroom, where I'll set a question about that. And the second thing is, since you've seen Science in Legoland, I would like you please to fill in the sheet that asks about what kind of animal you think this skull could be from. It's a real skull that we found, and you have to give evidence for why you think it could be this creature or not that creature. So fill that in and then submit that as an assignment as well. And one last thing, as we close, I have to show you a picture that James drew of the coconut octopus. You might like it, just like I did. All right, I'll see you next time.